Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Homeschool Helps and Hacks. Today, we are answering the top 10 questions that keep homeschoolers awake at night. We are recording this one live, so if you have any additional questions, please drop them in the chat, and we will also answer those as time allows at the end. So I want to start by letting you know that no matter what you are feeling, we have all probably been there at one point or another. And it is totally normal as a parent to wonder if you're doing the right thing, if you can do what you set out to, and more. But I think this is amplified when you homeschool because you're taking on additional responsibilities and more challenges that you might not have otherwise. So, ladies, when we introduce ourselves, I would love for you to share maybe what has been your biggest homeschool question, fear, or worry that has kept you up at night during your homeschool journey. I'll go ahead and start so you can think on that. I am Sunny, Sonlight's community manager and a mom of 2 children who have been educated entirely with Sonlight. I did not plan that from the beginning, however, but after a year or two, I fell in love with homeschooling. And so now I love to tell everyone how amazing it is and why they should consider it. But that said, sometimes I do question if I'm doing a good job or even a halfway decent job. So my biggest homeschool question oftentimes is it worth it? When I'm exhausted and I feel like I don't have enough hours in the day, is it worth that time I'm sacrificing right now? And are my kids going to turn out like I hope they will? Or will we all still be close when they are adults? So deep down, I do think it's worth it, but that is my keep me up at night question. So let's go ahead and go into introductions. It looks like Jonna might be frozen. So I'm going to start with you, Amber. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and what your biggest homeschool question was, either in the past or right now?
Sure. I have 5 children. 3 have graduated from my homeschool. I still have 2 at home that I'm homeschooling, a son who's a junior, and a daughter who's in 6th grade. I was a former high school teacher and coach before I became a homeschooler. But I've homeschooled my kids all the way through. And even though I used to teach high school and was in a classroom, probably one of my biggest fears was that I just wouldn't cover everything, that I couldn't be enough, that my children would go off to college and I'd wake up and say, I forgot science. I don't know, something major that I don't know. And the nagging doubts that it's not enough, I haven't covered enough. Are they really going to be prepared? There are so many things now that I'm at this point in the journey that I'm so thankful for with homeschooling, but those are kind of the nagging underlying things that still haunt me sometimes, even though I've graduated 3.
Well, thank you so much. Jonna, it looks like you are moving now, so we'll go ahead and move into your introduction. For those watching, Jonna is dealing with some inclement weather, so we're hoping that doesn't cause too many interferences. But if you want to start with your introduction, Jonna, and tell us what your biggest homeschool fear or question has been.
My name is Jonna Lawrence. I have 4 children. I have graduated 3. And a lot like Amber, what would keep me up at night as my kids were approaching graduation, I was so fearful that they were not ready for college or they were not ready for the adult life, that they would not prove to be the smart children I knew that they were, that somehow they would flunk out of college.
Looks like she might be freezing. You froze up there again, John.
Am I back?
You're back, yes.
Okay. I don't know where I was, but my biggest fear was that my children would fail and not be able to shine to be the smart children that I knew that they were. And all 3 that have graduated have exceeded expectations, and they contribute being homeschooled for their success.
That's an amazing testimony as well. Sheila, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I am a retired homeschool mom. I have 3 kids and they are all graduated from college and launched into the world. And I think my biggest fear when we first started, I had a kindergartner, a 3-year-old, and a baby. And I was afraid of high school math. I'm not a math girl. And I thought, I'm going to have to put them in school once we hit the high school because I won't be able to teach math. And I didn't teach math. I found other people to teach math, but my two kids who homeschooled all the way through did homeschool, and I didn't have to do it. So that's my success story. The oldest one is a finance major. The second one is a mechanical engineer, and the third one is a nurse. So they all went into science and math kind of fields, and I didn't have to teach them high school math. So I count that as a success.
That sure is. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you, ladies, all for being here and providing your perspectives as we talk about this. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Our first question is about curriculum. If you are using Sonlight, you know there is a lot of material and a lot of books to read. So what happens if you cannot finish all of your curriculum by the end of the school year? And then do you need to add electives or other subjects in with your Sonlight as well?
I'll go first. So we found ourselves in this boat where we had fallen behind, and there were a few things that we did. With my oldest son, we had transitioned from one math to another, and when he took the placement test, he tested a little bit behind his grade level. So for that first year, what I did was I bought both of the levels. I think it was first and second grade, and just kind of sped through the first grade because I knew that a lot of it would be review, but I knew so much of it was foundational. And remember, I'm afraid of math. So we just kind of churned through the first half of it until we hit the point where he was learning new material. So one thing you can do is just kind of speed things up and kind of double up on the assignments, depending on what subject it is that you've fallen behind in. Another area that we kind of would fall off is science, because, hey, if you don't like math, you probably don't like science. So one thing I did for that was we did the 4-day schedule because that lightened my load, and I didn't have to do quite as much of it because I had 36 fewer days that I needed to worry about. And then finally, if you really are way behind, like in multiple subjects, what I would say to do is to try to keep the continuity of the subject. So if it's history, you want to kind of zip through that history timeline, or if it's math, you don't want to skip too much, but try to trim out the extra. So if you can trim out a read aloud book, if you can trim out some of the extra math worksheets or chapters or whatever, if there's an area where you think your child is doing okay, then it's okay to kind of truncate some of the extra stuff in order to get caught up. And if worse comes to worse, you just keep going. It's really not the end of the world if you do summer school, or if you just stop at week 27 and you pick up when school starts with week 28 and you just keep going.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think often in elementary school is when we get really hyper sometimes about missing or skipping or something. And that's not necessary. Most of us would never go back and say, oh yeah, I remember that we studied these things in elementary school at this. No, it's all learning. It's all learning. So if your children are learning, bravo, and keep going. When it gets to the high school subjects, obviously, you need to be careful about getting too far behind in your maths or your sciences or any of those core subjects for high school. But again, keep just pushing through, just keep a day at a time and do what you can and catch up where you can. With Sonlight, I love, like Sheila said, there are times we'll drop the read aloud, or not the read aloud, there's often an extra book that goes with the history spine. Sometimes we just hang on to the spine and eliminate the extra history book. Sometimes, because literature ties so tightly with the history, the extra history book is easier to hang on to than that one literature book. Guess what? By the end of the day, even if I only read a half or 3/4 of the literature or the extra history books, I have covered an immense more amount of material than I ever would in a traditional school. And then as far as elementary, we had several times a move, and I don't know why, but we always seem to move in October or November. Thank you so much. So right when school's starting, that's when we move. So I had many times where we really had to flex a little bit. I knew a move is coming up, start a few weeks earlier, know that we're going to go a few weeks later. It's okay. And they're learning.
I was gonna say when I got behind, I always focused on my skills, and I didn't. And I have come to realize that with our HBL, our history, if I take it across more years than it was designed, I'm still getting more in them than whatever the common child gets. So, or when
And
I
Jonna,
got
when you say skills, you're talking about the
math
sciences and
and
math.
my math skills and my
I'm going to guess grammar, probably.
Reading.
Yeah, I just thought maybe we needed to define that.
yes, I was saying math.
Yes.
And then my language arts.
Yeah. Good.
So the reading, the grammar, the writing.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, and just to give you an example, I was looking at this with my daughter, the Sonlight High School HBLs, all of the literature that is included in those. I think when I was in high school, I only read about 7 of those books. And I was in the honors English classes and like all of those things. And compared to Sonlight, it's just nothing compared to Sonlight. So if your kids are doing even some of that literature, they really are getting enough. As far as electives, I know, Sheila, you mentioned outsourcing teaching math, a subject that you didn't like. This is kind of the approach I take with elective subjects at this point because my kids are not in high school yet. So we're not as focused on a high school transcript. Any extracurricular activity that I do not feel skilled to teach, I outsource that, meaning that my kids take their dance lessons and their music lessons from people that are talented in those areas. That is not me, right? Or if they're playing sports, all of that is outside. That is not part of my homeschool. I really just focus on what Sonlight has provided for me with the IG. And that is what I'm teaching. Everything else, they kind of go elsewhere for that. So I think it is relatively easy to customize to the situation in your home. And you definitely do not feel like you have to be on any certain pace, even though we give you 36 weeks in the IG, that does not have to be done in 36 weeks. So speaking of the IG, I know I use that as kind of a record keeping device in my house, but when it comes to record keeping, whether you're new to homeschool or maybe you've moved to a new state, how do you record grades or figure out what paperwork you need to submit to your school district or your state at the end of the year? How do we do that with Sonlight?
So I've homeschooled in, I think, 4 different states. So at the beginning of every move, I often would reach out to HSLDA. So that's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Is it an association? I'm assuming it's a. The HSLDA will have on their website requirements for states. So for instance, in New York, we had to report to a district. In Pennsylvania, it was something different. Maryland, something completely different, was the county. So all different scenarios. So the best thing to do is to check with an organization like HSLDA or a statewide homeschool association that can give you exactly what you need to provide to the state or whomever is keeping track of your homeschool journey. So that would be absolutely the first thing to do. And every state is different. So look, whether I was using Sonlight or not, that didn't really make a difference. We were giving, in New York, I think we just had to say, oh, pass or fail. And that was it for elementary school. Other places they don't care about any grades. You never have to submit grades typically. But just here are the materials I'm using. Here are the kind of things I'm doing. So it's not super complicated. It can be intimidating at first, but there are a lot of resources out there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that each state is different. So it's important to know what your state requirements are. I live in a relatively easy state. I know there are easier states where you don't basically have to do anything. And so I just do what my state requires. I try not to go above and beyond, because who has time to be, to do the extra stuff. So in my state, I did not have to keep grades. I kept grades for high school because I was going to need it for a transcript.
Mhm.
But to be honest, my school, our homeschool, was a mastery-based program. So my kids got A's because we kept going until they got it. So it wasn't like, oh, you took this test, you got to be okay, we're moving on. Nope. We're going to go back and we're going to refresh and review the stuff that you didn't get, because I wanted my kids to learn. And so, so I have a fun, quick story about that. So my oldest son wanted to go to high school after having been homeschooled since kindergarten, and he wanted to go to a small private Christian school where he was playing sports at the time as a homeschooler. So I had to create a transcript for him, and I was a little intimidated by that, and I was a little fearful that I would be judged, that if I gave my son straight A's, that, oh, well, of course, you think your child is the brightest thing in the world. So I was a hard grader, and I gave him 1 or 2 B's. I don't remember now. I can look it up because I still have that transcript. But he graduated 3 years later with straight A's in that school. The only B on his transcript was mine. So don't be afraid to award good grades to your child if your child has earned it. And like I said, I really only kept grades for high school because I knew I was going to be creating a transcript for college. But in the earlier grades, we just learned. We just did the work and mastered it and moved on.
I agree. I think that's so important, especially in the early grades. There are many, many schools in this country that do not keep grades for elementary. And then sometimes homeschoolers are beating themselves up that they don't have these grades or whatever. That's not the point. The point in elementary school is to learn. And so I love that, Sheila. I think that's so right. And same as you with high school. I also find it interesting when my kids have taken the SAT, they generally fall exactly where I have scored them on their transcripts. If I have a very A student, their SAT scores were very high. And the ones that I said, we got 3 A's and a couple B's, and their SAT score reflected that. So that gave me, and also standardized testing. I know sometimes there are a few camps about that within homeschooling, but some states require standardized testing. I've never had a problem with that. I actually enjoy standardized testing my kids because it helps me kind of see, all right, where do we balance out? So I think it can be a helpful tool.
I love what you said about the standardized testing, because that was something we didn't do in our original homeschool state because it wasn't required. Yeah. So I thought Sonlight was working, but I didn't really know for sure. And then we moved to Colorado, where we do have to test every other year. I realized, hey, it is working. And like you said, exactly where I thought my daughter would score, that's where she did. So, I mean, that's definitely something you can do, even if your state doesn't require it.
Yes.
But I kind of do that pass-fail grading system too. And if my kids miss something, I have them redo it until they know how to do it. Jenna, did you have anything you wanted to add before we moved on?
I was just going to add that for those who are trying to keep a record, whether it's pass, fail, or grade, recording what you used, your curriculum. I use Sonlight, this level, as a record for whoever's getting your transcripts is a way to create them, whether they're first grade, second grade, into high school. And we do standardized testing personally. My state or our cover school recommends it, but I think it's a great tool. I always call it mom's report card. Got nothing to do with the kids. It's all about the moms.
Also, I think this is important too. When you're reporting to a school district, typically you have to say, we're going to cover these subjects, or we're going to do this. I know in Pennsylvania and New York, the requirements were more stringent, but I actually really loved that, because I thought, if anything were to happen to me, and our next breath is not guaranteed, but if anything were to happen to me, there is a log of what my kids have done as far as their subjects, so that if my husband had to put them into school somewhere, there would at least be this basic awareness of what they've covered. So I think it's, sometimes we can, the government wants to know, but sometimes it's just good and healthy to have a record and to know.
Kind of a point of accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we do have the scope and sequence on the Sonlight website.
Yes.
So if you are wondering, like, oh, I'm doing this level, what does that cover? We've already done that information for you. So you can find it there, and it does make it easier for recording in that
Sunny,
way.
that's huge. I have a friend whose daughter was accepted into a cross-country Division I program. And for the NCAA, it's a nightmare of record keeping. And she just got this opportunity during her senior year. So the mom had to go back and log all this stuff for the NCAA. But praise the Lord, she had done Sonlight, and Sonlight has that, the scope and sequence. So sometimes that's intimidating to people. Oh, it's literature-based, But Sonlight has it laid out so nicely. She was able to go back through the program and provide all the information that the NCAA needed. So it really is amazingly helpful if you need to go that route for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you mentioned college students too, because ultimately when you're homeschooling, there's always that question of, will my kids get into college, or will they grow up to be, fully functioning adults? And I know right now we're releasing sneak peeks into our 2022 Sonlight updates. So people are kind of starting to think about what they're doing in their next school year. But how and when should you start thinking and planning for that next school year? And when should you start considering high school and maybe college admissions as part of that process as well?
I start about now looking for the next year. I was just telling a friend, I was like, the grass is not greener on next year's side of the fence, but now's the time to start preparing for getting into that year. Where am I going to be? What do I need to get? What do I need to update if I'm using Sonlight? And when it comes to preparing for high school, I like to tell moms around me, when you're in 6th and 7th grade, start thinking through what their first few years of high school are going to look like, so that you have them on track. Because you don't want to be in their sophomore, junior year and realize, oh, I really needed to have started this back in 7th grade. So
yeah, I'll jump in here for a second. If you have a student that wants to pursue a military career, the time to begin thinking about that is when they're born. I'm just kidding. By 6th grade, 6th, 7th, because starting 7th grade, I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be considered throughout 7th through 12th grade. So military would be one reason that you really need to pay attention. Sheila has a daughter who just graduated from a nursing program. If you have a child that is bent toward medicine or nursing or anything like that, that would change maybe the course of what you do in 9th through 12th grade. You're going to take maybe AP chemistry. You're going to take anatomy and physiology. You're going to want to beef those areas up. I had a son who's not a science. My husband has a PhD in biochemistry. We have yet to have a science child. So my oldest son, was not as into it. So he took biology, took chemistry, physical science, some of those. But his senior year, he did not want to take science, but we did psychology instead. And that's kind of a soft science. He loved that. And it's been great because he wasn't going into a science field. He's in finance, business, marketing, whatever. He doesn't need it. So yeah. Also, just to say, thinking about next year, some of the moms listening are overwhelmed right now with this year, right? And maybe they're in the middle of a move, or there was a death in the family, or there's some huge monumental thing. In the ideal world, yes, you're going to start thinking about next year now, but it's okay if something's going on and you can't get to it. You will be okay if it's June and you're starting to think through that. It's okay. But ideally, yeah, it's nice to start now.
I started thinking about high school in 7th grade because I realized that was where my hats were going to change. So I was going to move from being the primary teacher of all subjects, and I was going to move out of that role into guidance counselor and finder of outsourcing role.
Yeah.
So in 7th grade, I started reading. Sonlight has a great resource. The title has changed since I read it, but it's something like the Homeschoolers College Admissions Handbook, something along those lines. And I read that the summer going into 7th grade. And then I read it again the summer going into 8th grade for myself. This was like continuing education credits, right? I mean, I was having to learn a new role, and I wanted to be sure that I was ready for my new role and that I wasn't going to be caught off guard, and that I should have been doing something, but I didn't know about it. So I didn't start record keeping or whatever that thing was. I wanted to be prepared. And the more you learn, the less scary it is. Like, you educate yourself as to what it's going to look like, and you get to read other people and what they did. And it gets less and less scary because you are more aware of what the next steps are. And I think my biggest takeaway from having done that was learning what a transcript was and how to make one that would be recognized by universities, because we knew our kids were going to go to college. I mean, we had college-bound kids. And so my greatest fear was that I was going to do something that was not going to let them get into the college of their choice because of negligence on my part. So I would say, for your own peace of mind, start that research in middle school so that you're well prepared for high school. And then you will learn, like, oh, I can devise a 4-year plan. I can tweak it if things change, but you're going to do English 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I mean, you have to do those 4 years. And then, okay, well, we have to do some math. Do I have a math kid? Are we going to get to pre-calculus and calculus? Or are we just going to stop at algebra 2? Or maybe even before that, if you have a non-mathy person at all. So just knowing your child, knowing what your 4-year high school was like the kinds of classes you took, the kinds of electives you took, and what counted as electives, and do you have to have electives, and what do they have to be, and all those kinds of things. Like, starting to think through some of those things and where you can fulfill them, because you don't have to be. You can be, if you are that good and you want to teach all 4 subjects through high school, you absolutely can. I have friends who did. I knew that was not going to be me. I'm not an art teacher. I wasn't going to dissect anything, and I was not teaching that high school math. So I knew that those were going to be subjects that I was going to have to find someone who enjoyed those things. And then I could keep the things that I enjoyed, like history and lit.
Yeah, let's remind people of this too. If you figure out what college they want to go to, what university they want to go to, then you can also check there and say, okay, what does this look like? So even by 10th grade, if you say, oh, my child is pretty bent on going to this particular school, then look and see, what are the requirements? What do I need to beef up? What subjects have we not done yet that we really need to make sure we cover? All of those things are really helpful.
Yeah, and different schools have different requirements.
Absolutely.
So like Amber was saying, if you have a child that wants to go in the military, if he's going to enlist in the military straight out of high school, that's different than going into ROTC at a state university or going to the Naval Academy. I mean, those are all different. And so obviously the requirements are going to be different. Your transcript is going to look different because it's like you're applying for a job, and your job application is going to be suited for the job that you're applying for. It's the same thing with a transcript for high school. If you're going to a Bible college, it's going to show every Bible study, every book of, that you've read that's Bible related, mission trips you've been on. But if you're going to state university, they don't care about those things. So those aren't the things you're going to focus on and highlight. You only have usually one sheet of paper to get everything on. So you want to really focus on the important things for that particular school.
That's right. And those schools are going to look at that piece of paper with that subject and a grade and a GPA, and it's one sheet of paper. They don't want your history of what you taught your kids and your field trips you went on and all of that. None of that matters. My 3 children went to school with a piece of paper, and it didn't even have its senior year, because you're usually not done with your senior year yet. So sometimes we're so afraid that I don't know what we think schools are sending to colleges. They're sending same thing, a piece of paper with the grades. And we have lots of resources, and there are lots of resources out there to help you create a transcript and all of that. There are lots and lots of helps.
In fact, there's one on the site about transcripts that you can download and read.
Sonlight also has, I don't know if it's a blog or a special page, but different ideas of how to give grades for some of our subjects that might be more difficult, as in history or literature. So how do you give grades for those subjects? We have blog posts and all sorts of things to help with making those decisions.
Yeah, and if your kids are young, like early elementary, you don't have to worry about this yet. I know, like Sheila said, not until 7th or 8th grade once you get into middle school. And that's just to give you plenty of time to prepare for that. I know my daughter is in 7th grade right now. And when I ask her, what do you want to do with your life? Of course, she doesn't know. She's 12 years old, right? So there's still time with that. But I know when my kids were in kindergarten, people would be saying like, oh, are you going to homeschool in high school? How do they get into college? And when they're that young, you really can take it 1 year at a time, see what they're learning right now, and then choose your program for the next year. But what do you guys think if you feel your child maybe needs a little more time in a certain subject or a level? Maybe you pushed them a little too fast initially, and now you're wondering what to do next year or how to slow them down. Or maybe that child is feeling like they're failing academically, or maybe comparing themselves to some more advanced siblings. What do you do in those situations? And how would you encourage a family in that's going through that right now?
Learning is the most important thing. Learning. So if they're being pushed too hard and they're not ready for it, you need to slow down. If they're bored, you need to give them other options. They need a little bit more. Learning is the sweet spot. Okay, not a grade, not what everybody else is doing, but are they learning? Are they growing? If they're whizzing through their math sheets and they know everything and they can explain it to you, then why are you there? Like move. Let them not be bored. But if they're struggling and they're crying every day and it's really, really hard, then it might be time to step back and figure that out. And especially in these elementary years and into middle school, it's okay. And I know this is just maybe to piggyback on what we were doing. Colleges don't care what your kid did in 7th or 8th grade. So don't stop stressing about that. They don't care. They don't want to know what Johnny read in kindergarten. So take those years to enjoy and to learn and to have that solid base. I'm not answering your question exactly, Sunny, but that's the slowing down or the making sure they're challenged. I don't feel like I hit your question exactly, but Sheila will.
I was going to say, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That a lot of times when you hit the roadblock.
Maybe Sheila will be answering.
Yeah.
We lost you, Jonna.
Oh, you're back.
Go ahead. Sometimes when you go fast because your child is getting all the concepts. The best example is math. They understand everything, and then they get to a point they don't, and you have to slow it down.
Yes.
That can be frustrating for your child, but if you talk to them that this is, and you talk to yourself a lot of times, that it's good to slow it down, because just like when you build a house, you have a foundation, and sometimes that foundation cures very quickly. And sometimes it takes extra time for those spots to cure. And you might have to add rebarb in there. So you might have to add additional things to that lesson to make it concrete, to make it.
Yeah.
Okay, we lost her again. I'll jump in and say, I often will talk to people in the Sonlight booth at homeschool conventions, and they tell me that they want to challenge their child. They don't, that's a very common sentiment. And I caution people not to challenge your child too much. I say it's very much, when you're homeschooling, it's like cooking. You can always add salt, but you can't take it out. So I would rather begin on the easier end. If things are easy, then there's no tears. Things are pleasant. And I'm not saying dumb it down. Don't do kindergarten level with a third grader, but don't do a kindergartner at a second grade level to start out with. You may get there, but don't start there. So I think a lot of times it's the placement that people don't take the time to figure out placement for their child, especially when it comes to math. Anytime you're transitioning from one curriculum to another, so whether you've been in public school and you're bringing them home, or you've been in private school and you're bringing them home, or you've been homeschooling with a different curriculum and now you're going to switch to Sonlight. And Sonlight offers 6 different math programs in the lower levels. So they're not all the same. You're not going to just get the second grade math because you have a second grader, because they teach things in different orders. So math placement tests on the Sonlight website will save you a lot of heartache, too easy or too hard. Same thing with the reading placement test. A lot of times people choose the level based on what their child can read, not realizing that our language arts and the reading go together. So you really want to choose based on the lowest common denominator. So if you have a first grader who's reading at the third grade level, but they can't write a complete sentence, then you don't want to start with the third grade level, because third grade is already going to be teaching paragraph writing. And that child is going to cry from day one because they're not going to be able to do it. So if you have found yourself, if you painted yourself in a corner where you've chosen and it's not the right level, there's a couple things you can do. If it's the beginning of the year and you're not very far into it and you've purchased a History Bible Lit program or an all subjects package from Sonlight, you can return it and get the level that you need. So we have a love to learn guarantee, and you can return that level that isn't working out for you and get the right level that is. But if you haven't purchased from Sonlight, or you're past the 18-week mark, then just like Amber said, just slow it down. Just take some time and set that hard thing aside. Sometimes it's just they are not mature enough yet. I remember when Tommy was doing math, he could do all the math except for time. He could not tell time on a clock. Later, we found out he was dyslexic, so the arrows, were pointing in every direction. I didn't know that at the time, so I just set the clock unit aside, and we kept going. And the following year, I pulled it back out, and he was able to do it. So for that one unit, I didn't want to ruin the entire year because of that one unit. So we set it aside and brought it back out when some time had gone by. And it may have been that he wasn't ready for it then either, but I wouldn't know unless I tried, and it just worked out. So I would say, put a little distance between that hard thing and see if you can pick it up at a later date, a week, 2 months, 6 months, and see if you get a better traction. And if you don't, then you might have an issue, which we found out we did. And so I didn't know that in kindergarten. We didn't discover it really until third grade is when we got diagnosed. But there were clues. There were some things that were going on that kind of made me wonder. And so we had to pursue getting a diagnosis and getting help.
So Sheila, that's actually an excellent segue into my next question, which was about children with special needs. If you're suspecting one or you don't know if they have one, how do you know? And if they do have a disability, how do you get help? And can you even homeschool children with special needs yourself, or do you have to get outside help?
That's a very subjective question for each individual person. I think when someone is homeschooling their child, they're going to know if the child is struggling in a certain area, whether it's handwriting, they can't write clearly, they can't write, like, Tommy struggled with B's and D's, he reversed those, P's and Q's were reversed, nines were P's, and all that. So it came out in his writing, it came out in his reading. We were participating in our church's Christmas program, and my husband was in charge of the shepherds, of which my son was one. And so he was with them. They were reading lines, and he came home and said, "Do you know our son can't read?" And I was like, "Yes, I know our son can't read." Because he didn't know, like, he hadn't compared him to other third graders and what they were able to read. So that's when we decided to pursue finding out what was going on. So I had a neighbor whose children were both dyslexic, and I talked to her and she directed me. So really, that's a great place to start, was with friends and other homeschoolers, people that you know that may have similar issues. You might talk to your doctor, your pediatrician, and say, here's what's going on. I would caution you, if you have a pediatrician who isn't big on homeschooling, you may not want to go that route, because they may think it's your fault. We had a great doctor and he was supportive. So he gave me some direction as well. And so we pursued getting him tested. And then we later found out that my daughter was dyslexic. So having that diagnosis turned out to be very helpful further down the road. When they went to college, they were allowed to have special dispensations. So like my son could take his tests in a quiet room where he wasn't going to be distracted, because he's also ADD. So having that was very helpful. But I still was able to homeschool them. I'm not a trained, therapist or special ed teacher or anything like that. My brother and his family, they have a lot of dyslexic kids, and they ended up having to do, like, it's a spectrum. So they had to get some outside help. I didn't have to do that. My kids were not as far along on the spectrum. So yeah, I would say ask around, ask your friends, ask your doctor, and then see what's available in your community to see if you do need to get some therapy, some outside help, or if it's something you can do. I talk to people all the time, and they find out, oh, you're a literature-based program? Yeah, my kid's dyslexic and, he can't read, so we can't do a book-based program. And I disagree, because so much of Sonlight is me reading to the child. They only are responsible to read their own books, their own readers, and I would read to my kids. So they were able to learn history and science and Bible and all those things that they couldn't pick up the book and read on their own, but I was reading it to them. And I read to my daughter up into high school. I joked with her that I was going to come to college with her and read her science, her college textbooks, but she finally got it together.
Sunny, one thing too I would add is that I think sometimes as mom, we're only looking at our children often, and we kind of forget what other children that age are doing or whatever. And I know, for instance, my oldest daughter, I was being so picky with her about her handwriting. Well, I wasn't ever looking at another second grader's handwriting. I had no idea. And when other people were saying to me, whoa, her handwriting is gorgeous. And I'm like, really? Because it's not quite slanting this way, and it kind of goes under the line there. And then I had more children, and I realized it really was very good. But we kind of lose that perspective. And so we think, oh my word, my kid has this incredible learning challenge, when reality, it might be a maturity issue, or it's just, we have forgotten what a 6-year-old actually can do, or whatever. Or we're trying to just put them in a mold. So obviously there are absolute learning challenges, but one other thing to remind us moms that sometimes it's good to to take a step back and say, okay, what is normal in this range for a 6-year-old, to help us a little bit.
I love that you brought that up. And I think it's important to remember too, that your kids will not learn the same way or at the same pace necessarily. Because I know I had a similar situation where my firstborn learns exactly like I do. So I thought, well, this kid is easy to teach because of course I knew the language she was speaking, and, you know, she was learning things very easily. And I thought, man, this is amazing. This is great.
Sure.
And then my second child came along with a totally different learning style, different personality. Yes. He does not like to sit still and listen to stories. So even just listening to read alouds was a challenge early on, not to mention any of the other skills. And so then I really had to, like you said, look at, okay, what is normal? What is the normal range for a child to learn to read? Or when can I expect them to sit still? And maybe some of those gender differences too, of, you know, girls versus boys, you know, they do sit differently, they'll move around differently, all of that. So I would encourage you, if you're a little concerned, don't freak out right away. Or if they're different than your first child, you know, that's probably very normal. And I mean, I think anybody with more than one child knows that all of those kids are different. But like Sheila said, you know, check with your doctor, check with other people in that situation, because they'll kind of know what those normal ranges are for that age level. And then also, so let's say you're doing great in elementary school, everything is going well, but you start to worry about some of those upper level subjects, or maybe teaching high school. If you as the parent were not a strong student in high school, what do you do to allay some of those fears? And how do you make sure you can still teach things that you may not feel you're qualified to teach?
So Sheila touched on that earlier. And we have another friend who helps consult with Sonlight, who says what does she say, Sheila? The ministry of the outsider. Is that what Lisa says? Which I love that phrase. For me, and my husband is a biochemist, so we could tackle science, but I actually want my kids to like my husband. So that isn't always the best idea. Plus he's at work all day and then comes home and, hi, let's fight about chemistry for 2 hours before we go to bed, and algebra or pre-calc. Let's pop that on him too. So going to co-op for some of those upper sciences has been a huge blessing for us. Co-ops aren't available for everybody, but there is so much online. There's so much online. And then at a certain level, there are also community college options. So those, just a quick answer, those would be some of the quick things. And then if you do a math program like Math UC, there again, it's someone else who's lecturing and helping work through that. And they have lots of people you can call with questions and advisors. So you will never be alone on that journey in high school.
I say everything that Amber said is right on. And one of the things I like to tell moms too is that you just have to be a day smarter by reading the instructor guide or whatever ahead of your child. And I have learned so much in high school since I've graduated high school teaching my kids. So.
Yeah, we participated in a local co-op. It was a 2-day-a-week co-op. And then once they got to be in 11th grade, we would bump up to the community college and do dual enrollment. In our state, dual enrollment is free. So we get college credit for free at the high school level. And I did my due diligence. There's a website called Rate My Professor. And I would scour that website and I would read all the reviews on the professors. And we would choose very wisely about which classes I would let my high school kid to, go to in college, because things can get a little bit dicey in college. And so I wanted to make sure that my child had the greatest success that they could. The really good thing about that is not only are they taking college level classes, but if they get an A in a college level class and you put that on your transcript and then you give your child an A in history, If they can make an A in college algebra, then my A in history is justified. It's not like they're making all A's at home, but they're making C minuses in college. So it kind of helps to substantiate the grades that I give my child at home.
Yeah, that's great. And then how do you, as a parent, maybe conquer your own feelings of failure where you're exhausted at the end of the day? You're wondering how you can do this one more day, let alone another year or two or all the way through. Or maybe you're struggling to keep up with some of your other responsibilities, household chores, spending time with your spouse, any other things you're involved in. How do you kind of balance all of that and make sure that you're enjoying all those aspects of your life and still staying on top of homeschool?
Sunny, that's a really great question. And one thing I would like to say for whoever watches this now or in the next 30 days, please don't look at any of us on this screen and think that we don't ever feel completely overwhelmed by the incredible responsibility it is to homeschool and to run a home. It is overwhelming. And I am sure I'm not the only one who has cried hot, messy tears at night or first thing in the morning or all day long over what I perceive as my failures. So we have to tell ourselves the truth. We have to know that if this is what we're doing for this year, this is our calling for this year, and take it a day at a time and cry out to God for help. It is normal and natural to be overwhelmed. I think one thing that would be really important is to remember that you're not the savior. I'm not the savior, and I can't do everything. I am not God and cannot be all things to every person in my family and in my home. And when I get the most crushing feeling is when I've convinced myself that I'm responsible for everything, for my child's academics, for their spiritual growth, for their psychological development, for their social development, for their emotional health, for their nutritional needs. Like I rattle those lists off and I'm completely, totally spent. And it's not okay. I'm not responsible for all those things. And God is there. And so that isn't a practical answer to your question, but I wanted to lead with that because I think it's really important that we know we're not God. And also you're not alone if you feel overwhelmed. You're not alone. So what do we do about it? Right? So it's a day at a time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And sometimes we have to stop and say, you know what? Something has to give. Something has to give. I'm sorry, ladies, you can't do it all. You can't. Something has to give. So you need to figure out what is the absolute most important thing that I can do right now with my time. And you need to choose to do that. And it might mean saying no to other things. But if homeschooling is what you've chosen, and if you don't have a second job outside of homeschooling, then look at your homeschool as your job, as your employment. That's what I do. And sometimes that helps to settle me that this is my job. This takes precedence. I can't binge watch whatever I want on Netflix at night because I need to be rested and prepared for tomorrow. Life is about choices. Be willing to make hard choices. That's one thing.
Yeah, I would say kind of piggybacking on what Amber said, it is a job. You're not actually drawing a paycheck for this job, but there are people who do, right? There are school teachers who go to a building and they teach classes. And when they are in their classes, they are not on the phone. They're not doing the laundry. They're not making doctor's appointments. They're not doing all the things that we do as moms. And so you have the privilege of being home. And so there are times where you can do some of those things in the gaps, but don't think that you can do the grocery shopping, cook, a great meal, do all the laundry, do all of those household chores and teach your child at the same time. So I like to use the analogy of the flight attendant who says, put your own oxygen mask on before assisting others. In the years that I was homeschooling, my day would start way before the kids. But I'm a morning person, so it works for me. I would get up before they were up. I would have a quiet time. My husband would be home getting ready for work. He didn't leave at dark 30. I know not everybody has that. And I would get a run in. I like to run. And so I would go out and get a run in before we would start school. And that was life-giving to me. I needed that. If I got that in, then it gave me the energy, it gave me the brain space to be able to do my homeschool work. And then I also would include my kids. Like, we all live here. We all get to help clean. I was not as good at that as like my sister-in-law is, but they all had chores and they all participated in a few of the things. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I would often just be like, you guys just go outside and play and I will do, X, Y, Z. So I did not train my kids to do laundry and things like that. But that's something that I don't mind doing. I dare I say, enjoy the laundry. I mean, I don't hate it. But if you have kids who, that's something that they can do, you can delegate some of those chores to the kids. They can participate in the cooking. They can help set the table, clear the table, put the school books away, and really reduce the amount of stuff that you have in your home. If you live a simpler life, then you have less stuff to manage. You don't have to put away as much. You don't have as much clothes to wash because you've gotten rid of a lot of the excess. And so those are all just some small ideas on how to kind of trim the excess. My mom lived nearby and she would iron for me. She would wash my floors. Like, I hate both of those things. I don't mind the laundry. I hate to iron. I don't mind, loading up and unloading the dishwasher. I hate washing floors. And that was something she didn't mind. So if you have family that you can recruit, if your husband is willing to help, if he has bought into the whole, this is what our family is called to do, and if he has the time, then my husband would do the reading, the bath time and the reading at bedtime, so that I could clean the kitchen and have some alone time. That was actually like, I prefer you just take the kids. I've had them all day. I'm ready for a break. He wanted to be around them, and he didn't mind doing the bedtime routine and reading the read aloud at bedtime. And that gave me a break. And then there were those days where we have literally a school in our backyard, and I was ready to call that school and send those kids to school. And my husband would come home and I'd be crying, and he'd be like, you know what? You need a little you time. And so that weekend, the Saturday, he would let me do whatever it was that I wanted to do. Go shopping. Sometimes it was just go to the grocery store alone. Can I just buy the food by myself and I can read the labels for once? That was enough for me. So if you have a supportive husband that can pick up some of the workload, then I would capitalize on that.
I was going to say, hopefully I'm on. There are seasons, and we all know that sometimes there's a season in your year that everything is demanding of you, and nothing seems to get done. The school's not getting done. The kitchen sink is full of dishes. The floor's not been mopped. The laundry mountain in the middle of the laundry room has been climbed by the toddlers. All of you guys are what is right where you are, but sometimes it took me just saying, I don't have to do school today.
Yeah. I'm glad Jonna brought that up, because I was going to say also, I remember the seasons when I have a second grader, a kindergartner, a preschooler, and a nursing baby. And you think, when am I going to do, whatever school I'm supposed to do and do everything else? But everything is a season. So Jonna, you're back. I don't know if you want to continue with that, but just that idea that there's a season. You said sometimes there's a season for a couple months. I was thinking, or sometimes a couple of years, depending. It can be a very long season.
Within the year, there is a season.
Yes.
Like usually for us, it's always the spring when the kids their kids choir is doing stuff and all the extra things
Yes.
come in, and I feel like I'm at the circus spinning plates and they're all about to fall. I
Yeah.
pick one plate and I make sure it gets done,
Yeah.
and I take it off the spinning rotation.
Yeah. How do you eat an elephant?
One
Bite at a
at a
time. That's right. That's right. So I think that's a good reminder. There's something else that Sheila said that, oh, I know. When she said simplify, also, I think the larger your family is, the more you have to simplify. The larger your family becomes, the less discretionary time you have. Which I remember learning that from a homeschool mom of about 8. I think she had 8 kids. And I thought it was just really, it just hit me just in the right spot at that season that, you know what? I have 5 children. I don't have 2. And people with 2 children have a little more time than I did at that moment. So it's kind of like if you have a lot of money or a little bit of money. If you have a lot of money, you don't have to be quite as careful. You can shop at more expensive grocery stores. You can go out to eat. But if you are only making a little bit of money, you can't go out to eat. And you shop at grocery stores that are low budget, right? So you have to be careful. Same, you have a large family, you have little less time. So you have to simplify more. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I have a friend with nine kids, and she homeschooled all of them, and she used those kids. Like, I hear her say, "Oh, this kid fixed me breakfast, and this kid did that," and I'm like, "What? Like, you have little servants at your beck and call," because she had trained them all to do that. And that's another thing that you can do too, is you can utilize older kids to teach the younger kids. So when you only have 2 kids and they're only a couple years apart, you can group them together. You have a very small classroom. That's very doable. But when you have a 9, 10, 12-year age gap, you can use the 12-year-old to teach the 5-year-old to read, or have them read aloud to the younger child. And then you don't have to read the preschool books. And then that 12-year-old gets extra practice reading aloud. And that's a great thing too. So
yeah, you guys have given so many great examples. Let's go ahead and move on, though, to managing those outside expectations. So what about in a situation where maybe your spouse doesn't think you're doing a good job, or maybe he comes home and the house is a mess and kids are screaming and it doesn't look like you're doing anything, or maybe grandma is saying that you're depriving the children of something by homeschooling them. Or maybe you've had that major upset to your life, like a major illness or a death in the family, or something that's really shifted things. Should you consider putting those kids in school then, or are you still capable of homeschooling? How should you handle these situations that kind of come from the outside and threaten to derail your normal homeschool life?
I really trust my husband's viewpoint. I'm a detail person, and I can kind of get lost in the weeds a little bit. And he's more of a big picture person. So there were times where I remember going to him with a question like, I'm considering this or this, and I'm not sure what to do. And so he would take it seriously, and he would do an evaluation of it and ask me some questions. Sometimes I felt like the questions were attacking me, but he was only gathering information. He's a scientist, so he's all about the data. And then he would give me his feedback. And if I felt like it was incorrect, then we would have a conversation about it. But there were times where he would say, I think you should do X, Y, and Z, or you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, or whatever it was. And I would have to really listen to him, because he could see things that I couldn't see. Sometimes we're too close and we can't see the forest for the trees, is one of my dad's favorite sayings. So if he is coming to me with concerns like that, in 3rd grade when Tommy couldn't read, then we explored that. Like, okay, so if he can't read, what's going on? Let me go talk to Lori and see what's going on. So there could be some validity in that. And I would encourage you to be open to constructive criticism. It could be that he's never walked a day in your shoes. So maybe it's time for a little role reversal, and you hand him the Sonlight Instructor's Guide and the stack of books and say, okay, you tell me how I can do a better job, and let him experience what it's like. And then a lot of times he will back off and say, you know what, you're doing a great job. I didn't know how hard you had it. So it could be that. I know with grandparents, we had some concerned grandparents, and I have to be honest, I do have a college degree in education. I never did teach in a classroom outside of my, college internship, or whatever you call that, the
Student teaching.
Student, yes,
Yeah.
thank you. So I never did teach in a classroom outside of that. So when I had my parents came up to me and was like, really, you're going to homeschool? And I'm like, they're going to pay me to teach someone else's kids. You don't think I can teach my own kids? Like, come on. So I did have a little bit of pushback from my parents, but I understand that not everybody has that. And I remember the first year we started, I had my doubts. I was trained to teach high school. I wasn't trained to teach kindergarten. I did not know how to teach how to read. I could tell you, I could teach you how to dissect a literature book, but I didn't know how to teach to read. And so my fear was, oh my gosh, I'm going to ruin my kid. He's not going to know how to read, which he didn't know how to read, but that's, we've already covered that. But I remember the first year just being like, you know what, we're going to take it 1 year at a time. And if this does not work, I will put him in school the next year. And the professional will make up for anything that I messed up. And we had a great year. It was fine. We had a fantastic year. So I think it depends on who the naysayer is. If it's someone very close to you, like a grandparent, your parent, your husband, then I think you need to give them serious consideration and maybe explain why you're feeling called to homeschool. Sonlight has a great article, the top 10 goals. Their top 10 goals, do they match yours? And you may not even have any goals. You didn't even think through that. So that may be a good exercise for you to do, is what are my goals? Why am I doing this? If it's to be the primary influence in your child's life, if it's because they've been in school and they don't know their times tables or whatever it is, it may be helpful to kind of do that and list out what your goals are. And it could be that if you have a conversation with that person and you talk through it with them, then they may see, oh, okay, like they've actually, my daughter-in-law has actually thought through this. Like, she has a plan. It sounds like a good plan, and she's willing to do it for 1 year and then evaluate. If you have someone who is a neighbor or, someone at church who you don't know well, you don't have to answer to them. Like, you can give them a very small, very simple response. Oh, we feel God is calling us to it, and move on. You do not have to give them your 12-point goal sheet and whatever.
Sunny, I think it's, oh, sorry, Jonna. Do you want to go first?
Well, I was just going to say, I had parents that every year would say, are you going to continue to keep them home or put them in real school? And it was until the oldest was in 7th grade, that my dad finally came back and said, oh, I now think you're doing the best thing that you could ever do for your kids. But I went through 8 years of, no, this is real school, Dad. It's not, I'm not just keeping them home. Like I'm hiding them away from authorities. But with that, my husband.
Okay.
The public school.
There we go.
Okay. But that was our thing until we had our 4th child. He said he would do school with the kids. Like Sheila was just saying, role play. And he was all excited. He was going to do school for the week and let me recoup from having a baby. It lasted for about an hour. And then the kids got a week off. So, but I have had, we started, one of the part of the questions, if a life event happens, And like this year, we had a major life event in our family. And it was, thankfully, it's our kids' last year of homeschooling. But I really had to every day, like, get up and say, we want to do one thing. So when you're in the thick of that, you can't look at your whole.
Yeah. Should we go? Should we move?
Amber,
Yes.
Oh, there she goes.
every
I
time
had such great wisdom.
you did. Yeah, I want to hear it.
I'm sorry. I was thinking of a couple things too. We can't say just because we've chosen to homeschool doesn't mean we're going to do it well and perfectly, right? There are times, sometimes moms, when you do need a little kick in the rear, you might not be really thinking through this and working the hardest you can. We all have a tendency to get lazy. So I think it is right to step back and evaluate and say, okay, am I really doing the best job that I could? If this is my desire to do this and do it well, am I working at it with all my heart as unto the Lord? That's something I teach my kids, and I'm modeling that in the way I'm doing it. I don't know if this will be popular to say, but also, am I loving my kids and am I loving my husband more than I love my homeschool? Okay, because that is really important. And what if I have a husband who says, you may homeschool through 6th grade, but we're sending the kids to school in 7th grade? I really believe before God that if that happened, my marriage is more important at that point than my homeschool. And I can respectfully appeal. We could have a conversation, but at the end of the day, I may need to make the decision to send my kids to school if that is where my husband believes that our children need to be. That would be really hard for me. But my marriage is going to be around a lot longer, Lord willing, than Severance Prep Academy. And so as difficult as that may be, and as difficult as that sounds, that may be a hard choice. Everything Sheila said, I loved about ask your husband to evaluate, ask him for help. My husband so many times helps me see the forest instead of this tree that I'm focused on. More often than not, he's more complimentary and supportive than I'm feeling about myself and what I'm doing. And so he's a great sounding board, and he sees things about our kids that I'm losing because they're just in my face all the time. Sunny, I don't know if you know this, but you're frozen and you're breaking up. Sheila, is she breaking up to you?
She's breaking up to me too, but I think I
think we got it.
Okay.
What do we do if our children aren't respecting our decision to homeschool, or how do we handle this maybe bad behavior, or if they're begging us to go back to a traditional school setting? Did I get that?
Yes.
Yeah. One thing I think, and Sheila, you feel free to jump in, is that sometimes there's a respect issue and a discipline issue that I think it's really important, moms and dads maybe who are watching, that from the time our children are small, they really need to learn to respect and honor their parents. And that's a really big lesson that probably should supersede most other lessons, because our children are going to be people under authority for the rest of their lives. My children at this age, if they say to me, I don't want to be homeschooled, then I say, I'm sorry. That's what we believe is best and right for our family right this year. And this is what we're doing this year. I don't flip-flop back and forth too much between lots of different options. We are doing this because we feel it's in your best interest. And again, I think there's a respect factor where I can look at them. I'm not going to say, we're homeschooling, get over it, shut your mouth and go away. It's not that. It's your dad and I have prayed. We believe this is what's best for our family right now. And so this is the course we're on. You don't have to choose this for your family, but we're answering to God for you right now. And I think it's always okay to consider, and you can respectfully consider. Maybe you have a son who's exceptionally good at soccer, and you want him to have an opportunity to be on a really good team locally. And so that means going to school. Have that conversation and talk about, because there are trade-offs for every decision. There are things about homeschooling that make life really great, but you miss out on some things. And then there are things about going to school that are really cool, but then you miss out on other things. So life is all about choices. And that's something we can have a real honest conversation with our kids about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's more of a parenting issue, not so much an education issue. And there are really good books out there on parenting that you may want to look into. But it could also be, especially if you didn't start homeschooling, like we started with kindergarten and a 3-year-old and a baby. So my kids, they never went to preschool. They didn't know what it was like to go away. I mean, they did Sunday school at church, but that's it.
Right.
So for them, it was just, this is what we did. It wasn't ever an option for them to go to school, because even though we had a school in our backyard and they could hear the kids, and then there's a Christian school around the corner from our house. They would see the kids at school and feel sorry for them because we were driving on our way to some kind of fun activity or something, and the kids were behind the cage, behind the fence at school. So they never had that desire to go to school until that oldest child was in high school and was playing sports for this small school. And then he came to us very respectfully and presented his case. And we prayed about it and decided to send him, but he was the only one. So I think for families who are bringing kids home, who have sent their kids away to school and now they're bringing them home, there is a period of what we like to call in the homeschooling world, de-schooling. So, there is a time period, and they say it's like 1 month for every year of school. So if you have a 3rd grader, it would be three months. You can do the math. So there's just some time that needs to pass for the child to not be like, well, this is not how my teacher did it. This is not how we do it in school. So there needs to be some time that needs to go by for that to kind of deprogram time to happen. You can make it very attractive by letting your kids school in their pajamas. By having special breakfasts sometimes. Maybe on Mondays you have Pancake Monday or something like that. Like, you can make it where it's a really attractive thing. You may have a very social child, like a extreme extrovert, and he wants to be at school, not because he loves school, but because he loves his friends. And so for that child, or for a time, you may have to be the social director and make extra play dates for that child, or get him involved in more activities, whether it's sports or drama or art classes, things where he can rub elbows with other kids. It could be scouts, there's all kinds of stuff. So if you need to find ways for your child to get their social fill, because that's what they miss, then, that may be something that you can do, even if you are not an extrovert. I'm not an extrovert. And I had to learn to do things that were scary for me, for my kids' benefit.
I think too, Sheila, maybe one of the things that is helpful is to play up the positive things, right? Like, hey, we get to go early on Christmas vacation. We get to go to the beach today. Everybody else is in school, like concentrating on what those exciting parts are. Okay.
So I think we are actually on the last question.
Okay,
when
awesome.
I looked at the list of questions, that was the last question. So, if my child misses his friends in public school, will my children be well-rounded or socially stunted if we choose to homeschool? Well, we're a little bit biased, but we don't think so.
Yeah. And I would say my children have, my 3 who've graduated have gone to really a large university, and they fit right in. They're not earmarked as homeschooled kids for any reason. And we've had other like live events. We have pre-recorded sessions, other places where we've talked about this kind of extensively. But yeah, I would just say that it's important for your children to have friends. And we've been always blessed to be part of a youth group and have a lot of opportunities for our kids. And to be honest, my kids have friends who public school, who Christian school, who homeschool. And we've had these conversations before. Do you wish you could go to school? And most of the time it's no way. Nope. I like being home. I'm enjoying it, but they're also normal, well-adjusted people.
Yeah. I had this conversation with my son. He's living at home with us for now, for a time. And we have lots of really good conversations around the dinner table these days. He's 24, and he has regaled us with stories when he was in college of people finding out that he was homeschooled and were surprised, like, you were homeschooled, but you're so normal. And he's like, oh, okay, whatever that means,
Yes.
So I mean, and think about it, kids in school who are socially awkward. You probably had kids in your class when you were in school who were socially awkward.
Yes.
It's not a homeschooling thing. It isn't like, oh, you must be socially awkward to homeschool. There are all types, and God created them all. He loves them all, and he has gifted them all in different ways. So it may not be, a silver time, but it could be another thing. Folks, I'm so sorry about our technical issues, but you will be able to listen to the replay. So if you had to drop off, you can play it back, and hopefully you will be able to pull some helpful things from our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.